This week, we start into compounding interest, which is chapter 14. We skip ahead over simple interest and we will come back to that, but compounding interest is very important and you will use it in future classes, such as managerial accounting, business finance, operations management. So you do want to understand how to do it. And you also must have your financial calculator. The calculator that I will teach to is the Texas Instrument Financial Calculator, the BA2 Plus. So please make sure that you purchase that if you have not already. Okay, so then this is the keys. Our time value and money keys are located on that third row down, again, of that Texas Instruments Financial Calculator. And you're going to want to use these. So the textbook teaches as if we are using the tables. There are some examples within the text that refer to the financial calculator, and those are the ones that you're going to want to look at. Do not look at the tables because those will not be available to you on the test or in your homework. So you want to get comfortable using these time value of money keys. The N represents the number of compounding periods. That could be number of quarters, could be semi-annual periods, could be annual, could be daily, could be monthly. So you have to read careful to understand how often it compounds, and then you want your N to be in those compounding periods. Your IY should match your N. So if your N is monthly, your IY should be the rate of interest, again, per compounding period. If your N was monthly, it'd be your rate of interest monthly. So you do have to do a little bit of math to figure that out. So if they give you the annual rate, which they will, and you want it monthly, you'll have to divide by 12. The PV stands for the present value, and that's how much money you have today, or it's how much money you're borrowing today. So today is always the key word to the present value. The PMT is the payment, and we will get into that. It's an annuity payment, and we will get into that in the next chapter. So in this chapter, that payment key is always going to be 0. And then the FV is the future value. So if this was an investment, it's going to be how much you put in plus how much interest you earned. Eventually, when we get into a future chapter, we'll talk about the loans, and then a loan's future value is always 0. It's all paid off. So you got to play around with the calculator, but you push the number into the keys, in through the keys, and then you push the corresponding button. So if it was 24 months, you would type in 24 and then push the N button. If it was 1% per month, you would push the 1 and then push the IY button. So always push the numbers first. They will show on your display, and then push the time value money key. And then I do have videos. I have videos out there that bring the calculator up as an emulator on my desktop, and you can see which buttons are being pushed. You have to just listen to me. I'm reading examples from another textbook, but you can still follow along and see how the calculator works. I also have YouTube videos of problems. So again, like I had mentioned, you have to deal with these compounding periods. So you have to first read the problem to figure out how often it compounds. And like I said, you're going to adjust your N and your IY. So annually is the easiest. It would just be once a year. So your N would be the number of years and your IY would be the rate per year. Semi-annually, you're going to take those annual numbers and you're going to multiply the N times 2. The number of years will be times 2. And you'll take the annual rate and divide it by 2. Same thing with quarterly. Take your number of years and multiply it by 4. Take your annual interest rate and divide it by 4. Monthly, you'll take your number of years times 12, and then your annual interest rate and divide it by 12. Your daily will be your number of years times 365, and the rate will be the annual rate divided by 365. Now, when you get to those daily computations, make sure your calculator goes out all 9 digits because you'll need them. You don't want to round too soon, especially in a compounding problem, because you'll end up with a significantly different answer. So again, here's a slide that gives you the examples of what you have to do then to convert your N into compounding periods and then convert your IY into compounding periods. So again, always make sure that those two match. Then there's some other calculator tips. If you get, you should get in the habit of making your present value a negative number. And to do that, you don't simply hit the subtraction button on your calculator. You have to push the plus or minus button. The plus or minus button will make your value negative. So if your present value is $100,000, you would type in 100,000, push the plus or minus button, and then push the PV button. If there's problems that doesn't matter, but there are some that it does, and then you're going to get an error on your calculator, and then students don't know what to do. Well, what do I do with that error? I can't solve it. It's because you did not make the present value negative. And what I do is, because there's 5 time value of money keys, we normally are only using 4. There's always one that's 0. So I always zero that out. I actually push a 0 and then push that corresponding button, and that way I never have to worry about any values being in there. You could also hit the second menu button and the FV button. That clears out those time value of money tables and makes them all zeros. So you could do that as well, but just make sure you're clearing those out, because if you do not, the values that were in there in the last problem will stay. And then also, again, like I said, make your calculator go out all 9 decimals. So you do that by hitting your second menu button, your decimal button, and it'll pop up DEC equals 2. You need to put a 9 in there and then push the enter button. Then you'll have a problem that's on your test as well as your quiz and your take-home quiz, and that's to calculate the effective yield. So like we talked about, the more often it compounds, the higher amount of interest you'll receive, because your interest is added to your account, which then earns more interest. So then that interest builds and builds. So what will be asked to do is, okay, to factor in the compounding, what are we effectively earning? So you use a menu in your financial calculator, a function in your financial calculator. You hit the second menu button and then the number 2, and you see the icon V above that. That stands for interest conversion. When you go into that function, you'll see 3 fields. The first field is the NOM field, and that is the stated rate or the quoted rate, the rate that the problem gives us. What is it per year? So in my example here, I have an 8%. So I would put in an 8, and then I would push the enter button. Make sure you remember to push the enter button. And then you got to look at what you have in your up above here. It tells you you can compute, you can enter, or you can arrow up and down. So that enter is telling you can push in a number and then push enter. Then if we arrow down, the next field we'll come to is the EFF field. Well, that is the effective yield, and that's what we're trying to compute for. So we need to arrow down one more time to get down to the compounding periods per year, which is abbreviated that C/Y. So there we tell it how often it compounds. So again, my example is monthly. So I would have pushed in at 12 and then pushed the enter button. Then I arrow back up to that EFF field, and then there I push compute. And then that will tell me that, okay, if I have a stated interest rate of 8%, but I'm compounding it monthly, I'm effectively earning 8.3%. So that completes the lesson. The real key to these ones is that you have to get that calculator and you have to get comfortable with it. So the more you can do in the homework, in the textbook, the better off you will be. So that is my advice, to get your calculator ASAP and start playing around with it.